home services, mainly plumbing, HVAC, decks, general contracting, fire safety, to name a few. But yeah, either I can do some Q&A with you guys if you have any questions, or the other thing we can go ahead and do is I can represent what I presented a few months back if it's new material for most of you, and we can go through some questions based upon some general tips and tidbits I have for folks to like find good market fit, improve fit to get more efficiency, and then get some more scale once you get more efficiency. But to open things up, does anyone have a question they've been itching to ask? I'm sure you're here for some reason. Like you joined the call, said, hey, I want to join this call. I saw the topic. If not, I can just go through the presentation. That might get some questions going. But yeah, anything come to mind? Oh,
well, Oliver, I can ask a question. It's Penelope. I do the Thinkific training. I write the Thinkific training. And my question was, I've heard from some of the people who have closed on businesses with us that Yelp and I think also Nextdoor tend to be belly aching sites, right? They're sites where people go to complain. Is that part of your experience? I mean, this is just anecdotal from two guys.
Depends. I think it's best to have a good presence to start off with, and then if you use advertising there, for example, you can accelerate it. Reviews in general, like Penelope, you could say that overall. Like when I started out, I was in the nonprofit space originally, and people had quite a bit of belly aching to do anyways. Like we'd give them out free samples, for example, of banh mi's made by like people from Cambodia specifically. Very delicious. People like to complain. But my point is to get around that, either work to generally build up your presence there organically and then do some advertising. I found that helps a little bit more for like Yelp, Angie's List, Nextdoor, things like that, because the reviews matter the most, of course. And to be able to accelerate growth, you need to have a good foundation. If you're finding there's quite a bit of complaining, I think complaints are good, if that sounds weird, if anything, because that way you can learn more about what your customer wants, why they're complaining. It could be a bit of a pain in the rear that they're complaining, sure, but it can also be very useful because you can see what the trend is, address it, and then have follow through. I think it's like having the right process to do that. For example, I look at Domino's. Like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but several years ago, they said how their pizza was bad and they wanted to improve it. And then they waited about an ad campaign for trying to go about improving it. That's one route you can take if you find that just a lot of people are complaining. But the flip side, I would say, is like just build up reviews. And then once you have a good number of reviews, I try to look for like ideally a 1 to 50. So like for every one bad review, there's 50 good reviews. If it's slightly less than that, like 30 to 1 or 25 to 1, that's fine. But the point is to do that and then grow the channel a little bit more to help answer your question. So basically it's like, yes, there's definitely that. But you could say that for anything. People just like to complain. Like, anyways, thank you for the question.
There are some people you will never win with, but it's very much the minority.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. But yeah, there's strategies you can take, and those are the two. One is admitting something's wrong or trying to figure out why they're complaining to like help them, because it might not be that you're doing something wrong. It's just like trying to figure out how to address a given complaint, because it could just be a misframing of some sort. Or the other thing is like, you have a good channel here, but you need more reviews. Usually that's a classic problem, is like one bad complaint is heightened because there aren't enough reviews. But yeah, Ben, I saw your idea. Happy to do a 50-50 as well. If most of you haven't seen the presentation yet, that's simple enough. Does anyone have any other questions, like just before I get into that?
I guess a little background on some things that I've seen in the marketplace. There's a lot of like 2 chucks and a truck for sale right now. I'm kind of like weighing the idea of like going after one. I know I'm familiar with all the problems of buying too small, but you know, at the end of the day, it might be better to have something than nothing. So I don't know if you go through the presentation, if you can kind of sprinkle in like what it would look like from a startup perspective versus what it looked like from an established business perspective. Because a lot of the two chucks in a truck, like I was looking at one the other day, is a website from like 1998, and has been running his business for 30 years. He says he's got enough phone calls to keep 2 or 3 plumbers busy, but it's just him right now. So like, what would you do with something like that? I don't know. So like, I don't know the right questions to ask to like kind of dig into that, because I'd like to see the presentation materials, but maybe if you keep that in mind during your presentation, it could be helpful.
Sure. Some initial things to help answer your question. I think you don't even need to ask this. This is like publicly available information for your given market. What I like to do is figure out what the total addressable market is for something like that, because usually say if like you're in like Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles. A lot of people obviously don't like to buy in California for certain reasons, but mind you, figure out where you are and figure out what part of the market you have. That's an excellent place to start. Like a few free tools you can use, or like somewhat free tools. In Google Ads, they have a keyword research tool that tells you the total search volume for a certain term. So if you can back into the math from there to figure out how much site traffic you have from certain terms like that versus the total market, you can see how much you could grow potentially for that specific business. Another easier one, if you don't have a Google Ads account, which say if you don't have the business, you might not yet, you can sign up for one for free. It's just some tools and things like that, they've been like restricting a little bit until like you start spending for obvious reasons. Search like SEMrush, you can go there and put in specific terms as well too. I like to restrict it by the specific area you can serve for a plumber, like, because that matters a lot, because it's not like somebody's going to go 50 miles out of their way to go service another city, for example. But I figured that out to say like, here's your addressable market, here's how much of it you have, to say like whether or not this is something fruitful. Because even if they're only getting like enough referrals for 2 plumbers, the issue I find with folks like that is going from that to like 5 to 10 plumbers, because usually it's hard to get enough for referrals to maintain that number of team members. Obviously, there's some good profitability at that scale, but you usually need to look at other channels besides referral, which is where I would look for something along those lines. You could also look at Google Trends as well too, which is another free one. You can go there and see whether or not certain things are trending or not in certain areas. You might need to broaden it out for like just plumbing in general, but besides that, look at the total house count. There's like Bureau of Labor statistic stats for certain things. Like when I was looking at metal roofing, like for like just a metal roofing client or not metal roofing client, metal roofing business. I was looking at the total number of houses and the percentage that could apply for getting metal roofs in particular out of the total number of houses in the like DMA you're trying to service. But anyways, that's how I look at it at first. Like that's literal stats and like some literal things you can do. I'll sprinkle that in throughout this. But besides that, any other questions before I get started?
Not for me. I'm specifically looking at like HVAC plumbing stuff when I say 2 chucks in a truck. Like, and I'm in Denver. I think other people on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, most of us are in large metropolitan areas.
Yeah, sure.
So the TAM is decently large. Yeah.
I'm in Denver as well, so I understand there's certain parts of Denver. There's also different licenses. Like mine, I'm not a legal expert, yada yada. Talking about this from a marketing standpoint and for like the service provided. But with a smaller team, I'd assume that you might want to focus on one versus the other to start with. I saw, at least in Denver, that HVAC is a little less regulated versus plumbing. You might want to double check on that, but HVAC might be a little easier to go after, and depending upon like whether it's commercial or residential as well too, you might want to look into that specifically. But yeah, I mean, some folks go after smaller rural areas too, because the benefit is there's less competition for those businesses, and if you can be like one of the main providers out of like 2 or something like that, say in like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, it could be a good route. But yeah, for the metropolitan, the same things I said before, I would do that. I'd also maybe try to focus on a particular service, or say like, say if that service doesn't have as much search volume, for example, look at the plumbing side, because that could be a good versatility thing to consider. If there's a master plumber in the business and you can say, okay, instead of going after HVAC, I'll go after plumbing instead. But yeah. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to go through basically fundamentals, like setting up good goals once you have your business to start off with, some basics for like research, due diligence, figuring out what type of offers you should give to folks and how to craft those, how you should define your audience. Like we kind of went through a little bit of that initially. Short-term solutions for a little bit more of focus on efficiency, like getting as much out of your budget as possible from a marketing perspective, and then long-term of how to continue with efficiency but grow at scale, and then a little more time for Q&A if you have any additional questions or anything like that. But let's see. All right, so SMART goals, I think, are excellent. Like it's a great place to start off to figure out what exactly you're trying to achieve in a given time frame. Make sure it's like something that's realistic to what the business can do or has done, and realistic to the resources you have. If you're going through buying and getting a loan of some sort, it's good to have some extra buffer for your budget for certain things like this, whether it's for additional ad budget, content budget, video budget, for an agency or something of that sort. It's good to plan those things out relative to your goals. You should figure out what the goal is first, though, before doing that. Otherwise, you're kind of just making a road to nowhere. The other things, obviously, within some of this stuff, like knowing your audience, like we went through this to a bit, but the obvious reasons before and after buying. Before, it's to say, is this worth my time to buy this? Is this a big enough opportunity relative to my investment to this business where it's going to matter? And then as you're buying it, one is to say, can I get more of this market? Is this a meaningful route? Or could I offer a new, like say if like you've already saturated the market, a new product or service, like you're doing HVAC already and like you want to get into plumbing, or maybe there's some sort of other general contracting thing that you could get into more to like broaden the business's offerings out. You could expand to additional geos, things of that sort. But anyways, and then these are like kind of these other additional steps after that. So once you know your audience, try to give them an excellent offer relative to what you do and what differentiates you versus other folks in the space. Be there like when they're ready to decide, ideally. So like reaching out to them is one thing to say, like, all right, when like you're considering things for like a bathroom remodel or something like that, great. And getting on that short list is wonderful, but make sure you're present once they're ready to make that decision. That's part of where digital marketing comes into play. Being there throughout the process too, to be helpful is also great as well, depending upon what your budget is. So initial place to start tends to be people that are looking for services when they need it right away. Example of this in plumbing would be, say, like emergency services. If there's like a broken pipe or something that's leaking that needs to be fixed right away, usually they just want an option that's going to do it fast, reliably. They don't have to think about it too much. They just want somebody to just go in, fix the problem before some more serious stuff happens. But some things like, say, home remodel, bathroom remodel, like different like long-term projects, or say like commercial projects, you might want to be there earlier on for different terms that they're searching for, different phases. And the other last thing is, obviously with all this, you need to be able to measure towards your SMART goal and towards this stuff to say, like, all right, am I achieving this goal? Am I getting more calls? Are these calls turning into clients? And is this happening on a consistent cadence? And this is just for the SMART goals. Like some of you just might be very aware of this. Some of you might just be doing this like unconsciously. But I think it's good to have this just to like understand, like, okay, like this is where we should start. Like it's great to want more leads, but then it's even better to say, I want to get 10% more leads versus the prior year, because that potentially could get you an additional 10% new business. And say making it timely and relevant, say over the next year or during the shoulder seasons, like spring and fall, for example, when things can be a little less full schedule wise for your technicians. It's good to put these out there specifically, and maybe even like do like a bigger goal and then smaller goals in between to kind of break them down a little bit. But I find this helps, even though this is like not just marketing, this is just general stuff for business. It's good to have this to figure out, am I actually achieving stuff with my marketing efforts? Am I budgeting correctly? Is this actually like something worth spending money and time into and stuff? Like before doing all that, like this is just a free, simple exercise to go through, just to say, like, all right, let's go through some of these things to figure out what our goals are and what we're trying to achieve overall. This is what I like to do with my clients, of course. Some folks talking to like a bigger, more established business versus you're just starting off the startup or something of that nature. Some, it's more like you have some goals, but then maybe there's some like additional goals that you might need to achieve, or you have the goals, but then within it, you don't really have the timeline outlined, or there's some missing step or two where things are getting stuck. It can be really good to go through this for a bigger business to figure that out. The startup, you kind of have a clean slate, which is the benefit. At the same time, it can seem like a lot because you're going from kind of nothing to something or trying to find market fit versus having it. The benefit of buying the business for like most people is that there's some sort of market fit you should see from due diligence, like they have sales, they have clients that have been happy, things like that. So that tends to be good early on, but then it's figuring out, all right, how can I elaborate on this to get even more? And the other great thing for a startup too, or like a smaller business, say in like home services, is they tend to have a smaller market share. So say like, all right, I have like a 10, 15% market share. Let's figure that out to find it. So then our goal could be going from that to like 25% in theory. Let's see. Besides that, getting into budgeting. So the next step besides the goal is figuring out how much money do I need to spend to achieve this goal. I like to know for the business how much they make per client or per project. This is just a hypothetical example, but say if like, you need a certain return to reach your certain like profit margins, like this is basically how I would look at that to say like, this is what the budget could be. This is very fluid. Like normally what I see with a larger business is they tend to spend about 10 to 20% of their total budget towards marketing. There's certain exceptions on like the higher or lower end, depending upon the type of business they're in. Like say, for example, for consumer goods, they might spend a little bit more versus like some industrial packaging or something of that nature. They might spend a little less in theory, just because they don't need as much of that budget, or it's going towards things that don't have a scalable amount, but like say, for example, like event marketing, webinar marketing, where it's like a set amount. Good benchmarks. That's a good question, Ben. I will send afterwards, like I'm just going to take a note on this real quick, but there's a couple of sites. I used to work at WordStream, and they send out annual like benchmarks in particular for Google Ads specifically. You can look up a few of them by industry. It varies a little bit more based upon geo, what you're offering, like whether or not it's a short-term or long-term project, whether or not you're residential or commercial, but those will give you like a rough estimate of like what it should cost as well too, and that should help you with the goal setting as well. But I'll send some links afterwards. I'll send a couple links for that. Let's see. Basically like the end bit for like the ROI based budgeting is like, yeah, of course, backing into your numbers, you should figure out what sort of return you're looking for and then how much you need to ideally spend to get it. Let's see. On top of that, it's also good to know what the value is for certain customers. It's good to get into the numbers more granular to say like what the cost is per lead, how much traffic you need to get a lead. So traffic being like people visiting your site, giving you calls, things of that nature, to say, for example, like you need like a good conversion rate's around 2 to 4%. You can get that a little higher for free information. That can go as high as 20% for free information, or something that's very urgent. Could be as low as 1% or less for something that just costs a lot more and has more touch points, key decisions that need to be made. But basically, I would consider those nuances relative to this. This is the basic way to start with it. Like this is how you could start off. To add color and context, you might want to pay a little more or a little less for certain types of leads. For example, a new customer might be more valuable because they have repeat business, and as a result, their actual lifetime value is a lot higher from an ROI perspective versus somebody that's just returning. You might not want to pay for that through Google Ads, Facebook. You might not want to buy an email list with their email in it because you already have it. But anyways, the point is figuring out some of these nuances. The classic one's new versus returning. It's an easy one to figure out because you already have their information. It's also a good way to get some more new customers. So not in this presentation, but a general tidbit. When you buy a business, in some cases, there's some customers that you're currently doing business with in the book, but there's others that maybe they haven't had business or they haven't done business with you in a while. Like they need a checkup on their system. they need their pipes cleaned, they need their furnace like cleaned, or like some of the ducts cleaned out, but it's been a while, they haven't even thought about it. So that could be an excellent place to just start to drum up some like initial basic wins. But anyways, getting into this particular tidbit, like besides the goals, it's figuring out how much you need to spend to reach the goals that you have. Some more here, some things we went through in particular just before. Let's see. Besides that, same thing I mentioned before as well too. The last thing I'd say is in general, it's good to set aside some of your budget for testing. For some folks, if it's a smaller budget, it might be easier to just use like say 5 to 10% of your total budget. But the point is to test things like new offers, like new audiences, testing new products or services you're bringing to market. It's always good to try to see how you could perhaps improve things, figure out what that future 80-20 is, because the way things are isn't necessarily the way things will be. Perhaps your audience might want a similar offer, but with slightly different wording perhaps, or something that's more direct versus like telling the story, or something where you outline the benefits, which is great to start off with, but maybe like give that in a little bit of a softer hook later on. Anyways, there's tons of different things to test. The point is using some of your budget to test it. That'd be ideal. If you can use more, that can help accelerate your learnings to figure out what works versus what doesn't. And another tip, if you just bought the business and you have a decent budget aside, especially if you get some buffer in the loan, it can be good to test in the first 3 to 6 months to like get some more learnings early on, so you can kind of get it out of the way to a certain degree, and then basically use some of those key wins to help you improve your conversion rates, try to get some more leads, get some more clients like later on. Basically that'll just help you long term. And then obviously you might need to do that again, obviously, but that's just another general tidbit. Getting into the next step, before I get into this, any questions on goal setting and budgeting for ROI and like why those things are important? I assume not, but okay. If you do, feel free to just put something in the comments or raise your hand. Let's see. So for knowing your audience, these are some tidbits I like to consider when doing very thorough research for the startup versus the established business. Established businesses, even the ones you buy that are a little bigger, the issue can be that they have this stuff covered, but they might not have it documented. It's good to have it documented so you can figure out what the most effective marketing messaging is, where you need to update it, and like perhaps if there's like new targeting opportunities you have on like certain channels versus others. Getting into some of it, here's an example of a sheet that I fill out either on our own with the team or with our clients. Just go down the line. Basically, I just added some like classic ones, for example, first-time home buyers, love that in this space in particular, but say going into like what product or service we're trying to offer, what's the pain point this person has related to this product or service. For somebody that's like newly bought a home versus like somebody that's trying to sell a home, that might be a little bit different. For example, the solution can be similar or can be slightly different. The hooks you have, so basically like how you describe it to get their interest, can vary, especially if they're like in a different age demographic, if they have a different budget, if they have a different problem. This stuff should inform how you talk with them and figure out like what exactly gets them to consider you. I also like doing some research. I think ChatGPT, Claude have really helped accelerate this process, but I like confirming this stuff just from a simple Google search, for example, or like I mentioned earlier, things like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, things of that nature. Like it's good to have some government sites or like third-party research sites that like confirm some of this stuff. Usually when I put more time into this, because this is more of you do this once every now and then. This tends to be updated, say if the market's been updated or if you're adding a new product or service or variation thereof. But that's why it's good to do it now, to get it documented and really know who you're going after. And the lingo for the last one is like how they talk about your product and service, because there could be a difference between how you describe it. Like say, for example, for an HVAC tech, there's a lot of nuances in the industry. There's a lot of lingo and know-how, and there's like very distinct things that define the HVAC tech, say, versus like an electrician, where like there's a lot of electrical work that can be involved with the furnace, but they're not necessarily an electrician. The client probably doesn't know and does not care about any of that, but but it's good to like note some of those things for lingo and how they talk about it, so you can do some marketing to them that relates to them and ideally empathizes more with what they're looking for. Here's another little example. Past done some work and still do some work with some museums around New York and the East Coast. This is one from the Met, for example. Just little old lady, just give some tidbits on background pain points, things of that nature. Let's see. Next step after defining the audience is creating a killer offer. And by that, I mean something that somebody sees, they're interested in, they have an easy way of accepting that offer, and they feel very happy accepting that offer ideally. Some starting points tend to be relevance and value. So having something that is based upon like what they need then and there. So like say with emergency plumbing, this is an easy one, or say with a locksmith, for example, if like you're locked out of your house, you probably need a locksmith to go help you get in, or say if like your key gets stuck in the lock. It's highly relevant if somebody's looking for a locksmith now, or locksmith nearby, or locked out of car or something of that nature. The value should be inherent, but sometimes it's not one-to-one with the relevance. Like one side of the value is I just want to get back into my house. The other side of it is I want peace of mind and security again. It's good to understand this relative to the person and like try to put yourselves in their shoes. Try to make what you're offering as simple as possible and easy to obtain. Pep Boys is a good example of this, like buy 3 tires, get the 4th free. The obvious thing is that you need 4 tires no matter what, but it's a better way of saying you get 25% off versus like you get a whole extra tire. Like, isn't that great? Like nobody else is really giving this extra tire. It's simple to understand to a certain extent. Some things are easy to explain versus others. I like to recommend to try to be simple where possible, or at least figure out a way to like make it easier to understand after like going through a few iterations. Outcomes, very important. So like if they take this offer, what should they expect? Like some cases it's simple, like if I get this locksmith, I'll be able to get back into my house again. Others say like if you're doing like, you know, metal roofing or something of that nature, it might not be inherent unless the person does research. So say if like you're in Denver where there's more hail, or like in the Front Range in Denver, which is in the mountains, there's a lot more hail. A metal roof lasts longer than a wooden roof. If you give that stat to show like, hey, you get a more reliable roof, that's the outcome. It might not be obvious to somebody, especially with a wide variety of options, but I would consider those things for sure. The other thing is risk involved. So the flip side, besides like the positive, probably heard about this psychologically speaking, people look at things both from the positive, what am I going to gain, versus also what am I going to lose if I don't do this? Like the obvious one, say being locked out of my house, would be saying like, okay, like I don't want to continue to be locked out of my house. What if I try to get in and I look like a burglar if I'm trying to just break through my window or something crazy like that? The risk is relatively obvious. Like FUD is like what I like to consider with this, like fear, uncertainty, doubt. So those sort of things can be just as appealing to say like why like you should do this. Like if some bad outcome happens of some sort, like there's some risk you're mitigating potentially. Urgency is like basically the fire, or like something that the fire, like to the flame, if you will, something that like gets people going a little bit more. So like all this stuff is wonderful, but if it's not needed right away, it doesn't matter. Like I need to get into my house right now, for example, versus like I don't need a bathroom remodel anytime soon. Like there's no reason for me to be urgent about it. Creating urgency is important, or understanding like how to build urgency up to say like, this is why. It could be with a promotion of some sort to say like, if you do this in this amount of time, you get 10% off. That's one decent way to do it. Another way to do it is to say like, okay, we have a limited supply of like a certain material you probably really like for your bathroom that looks really great. If you are one of the first 5 people to sign up for a bathroom remodel, we'll use this material for you. But if you don't, it's going to take several months to get it again. The point is, urgency is important to like basically get somebody passionate enough to pursue some of these things, because all these things are very useful, but without some degree of urgency, there's no point for them basically. Or like they could just do it now, they could do it later. Like there's no like again, sense of urgency. Effort and sacrifice, pretty important here as well too. To redeem the offer, you gotta think, how much effort do I need to put in to do this? I think a lot of systems, and maybe some other folks have been on these calls or like through the training, for example, have talked through this a little bit more. Like having a good ability to fulfill on the service is excellent. Say for HVAC, if I call in, like what else do I need to do? Do I need to like give any additional paperwork? Is there anything else I need to give you access to? Like it should be as minimal as possible, but again, sometimes it's good to have more versus others as well. Effort can be good for higher ticket items to make sure somebody's qualified, make sure that they're actually serious and interested in something. Higher ticket is usually, if it's above $1,000, there's more consideration. It's not something somebody buys online right away. For example, they tend to look at multiple resources, like at least 3 or more. Like for a car, for example, people on average look at about 5 different prices or 5 different dealerships before buying a given car, once they know the model and all that good stuff. The other thing as well too is the sacrifice. So with a higher amount of money, that's a higher sacrifice. So they're probably going to want a little bit more or have a higher desire for certain things. Like say if it's lower price, there's an expectation that the service might be lower quality, but that could be fine. If it's a higher price versus the market, for example, it's a sign that, oh, hey, this is like going to be some of the best service. I should expect that. It's good to know this relative to your offer to create these things. And I like to go through each of these things to list out, what is this relative to the business I'm marketing? Or for you guys, since you're owning the business, what is this relative to the business I own? A good agency comes into play for this, or a good marketing team member can own this as well too. But it's good for you to know this, because obviously customers are the lifeblood of like any business. So it's really good to like figure out, why do my customers care about these things that I'm offering? But again, it's also good to have like somebody like myself or another marketing team member go through this with you. Creating a killer offer. These are some of the more specific steps I like to go through. So besides like just outline the initial tidbits to kind of put it all together, if you will. So for example, new homeowners in Denver that need to repair their roofs after a hailstorm, like getting into that metal roofing, for example. They want a roof that's at a great value. Like they probably don't want to pay like double the price of the average roof, for example, but they might be willing to pay a little bit more to know that it has a high lifetime value, a warranty, like that it's an effective cost. That they might not necessarily be caring about the cost as much versus somebody that like is scraping by, that just wants the cheapest roof possible, for like a metal roof, for example. The so what factor, here's a few different things that came to mind for me at least, especially comparing to the competition. It's good to consider these things, like, are you lower cost? Is the metal in your roof higher quality? Like, is there some way that you're installing it that's more effective? Is there a great warranty where if something goes wrong, you go out there to replace certain things more versus the other guys? Are you efficient with service, but also are you somebody that like you want like to deal with, basically, or somebody that like provides effective quality service as well too? These are just a few, but it's going to vary by business. It's going to vary by what your like so what factor is, basically, to say like, this is why this business matters more to somebody versus others. The startup or the smaller business generally has a little bit more swiftness. Like a given client or customer tends to be a little bit more meaningful to the book of business. So like they are your world versus you being their world. If like, say you're the number one, like you get 10,000 clients a day or something like that versus like 1 client a day, big difference there. Or for example, the other thing too could be like, say you have a few clients that make up a large portion of your revenue, like over 20% of the total revenue. That's really important to consider the so what factor. The other thing is considering, all right, how do we get more of those, and how I diversify as well too? Like, what's the so what factor for similar folks like them that have been such great clients? Speaking the lingo, so the next step, like fastest roof repairs in Denver, if like this could be quantified in some form, or like get your roof repaired in blank number of days, to specify it. Like we do it in blank number of days on average, hypothetically speaking, but you could probably get some of these stats by like observing your team or figuring out like what you currently have going on with like your log, like your backlog of different business to see like if there's a differentiator of that sort. The warranty, for example, lowest cost guarantees like another great one. I tend to be hesitant about this for some versus others. Like this can be good for a new entrant to market versus like a larger business. You might just be eating into your business, like your book of business overall by offering something like this. I would use this maybe for like something that's like a loss leader of some sort. But again, it can also be good to look at the quality of things. So like having higher quality materials that are more readily available could be just as good of a benefit, if not even better. It's about knowing your audience though, like whether this is somebody that like is more focused on cost or is it somebody focused more on the end quality of the product. Final thing, you make all this stuff into different offers. The point is to bring it to market, to test it on different platforms. I find social media is one of the best because it's lowest cost and you can get some really good engagement metrics early on to see like what works versus what doesn't. What else? All right. That's a lot of stuff. Before I get into short versus long term for efficiency and scale, any questions on that stuff or anything come to mind? No, y'all are quiet today. All right, fair enough. I'm hoping this is helpful. If it isn't, or if there's something you want more insight on, just let me know. Let's see. Figure out like what your ROI is. That's usually the first step in general. It's kind of back to goals. Like if you don't know this stuff, there's like no way you can really improve on efficiency. Some simple ones I listed here: doubling down on channels that improve relative to your goal. In particular for efficiency, if you find some channels are more efficient versus others, like say you're getting an 8-to-1 return on Google, but only a 4-to-1 on Facebook, you might want to focus more on Google versus Facebook. It sounds obvious, but there's a lot of businesses where there's so much stuff going on that's hard to figure this out. But if you have just like a few minutes to look at your results and know where to look, or have an agency that looks on your behalf or a marketing team that looks on your behalf, this tends to be one of the first things I recommend doing. Besides that, testing out new channels, especially with a smaller business, you're usually not on a bunch of different channels. If you are, it might be good to pull back to, again, the top performing channels. But if you have like 1 or 2 channels where you're just crushing it, like say like referrals or email marketing or something, it can be good to do LSA, Google My Business, like trying to get some leads through this, going for Yelp in theory if you have a good presence there, Google Ads if you have good Google My Business, LSAs, things of that nature. You can add on to what you're currently doing, or you can look for brand new channels, like say TikTok might be a new channel, like you're doing well on social, but you haven't tried to reach a younger audience yet that might be new to buying homes or newly bought a home. Things like that could be good besides doubling down on what works. It's a short-term win in general because once you get to market, you should see some initial efficiencies. Create offers based upon what your business does best. This is going back to what we talked about with offers before, but usually with some businesses when they sell, because they focus so much on referrals or like because they don't really need the marketing as much, they don't think about it. So this tends to be a great opportunity to say like, this is something you guys do best. This is something that you could even improve on further. I don't know if you've seen the show Tires on Netflix with Shane Gillis. I think that's an excellent offer because they focus on doing tires at cost, because basically with the car maintenance they do, they make more of their money on the maintenance. But once you get people in for the tires, you should be able to see what's wrong with the car as well. And then they'll likely want some of the additional fixes and things of that nature. Hypothetical, and mind you, the show is more of a comedy show, not like this more serious marketing stuff. But anyways, Penelope, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, what is LSA?
Local service ads. So
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. For everybody else here too, Google My Business is what shows up when like you look on Google Maps. It says like Bob's Tires or Joe's HVAC or something of that sort. Local service ads takes that profile and creates ads which you can show up for on search if somebody's searching for your services, which is fantastic.
So who handles local service ads? Are you saying it's part of Google?
It is part of Google. It's in a separate platform.
Okay.
Either someone on your team can handle it, or you can outsource it to a vendor to handle, basically. So you need to go with Google, set things up. If anyone has questions on that too, I can help just by giving some free like tidbits on setting things up for LSA. But basically, you get it set up. You make sure like you can prove they have a license for the business, and then once Google approves you, you're Google guaranteed, which is like a little green check mark. Let me see if I can find an example of a listing like that. Just one.
That's great to know. I had no idea.
Yeah, right. I mean, in general, it's very useful. Let me see if I can show this real quick. But yeah, it's one of the easiest things, and the benefit of it too is that you get you're paying for leads, not for clicks. So if somebody's looking up your business and they call through or they fill out a form or something of that nature, or book a call with you, like you only pay once they call or book, not for like them just clicking on your ad. But here, let's show you an example. So this is a random one in Denver, HVAC near me. These are the local service ads. This is just some anecdotal stuff from like other accounts. But these two ads are local service ads here. They have the ratings, which is one thing they like rank for. The other is it has the listing and the services offered. And then it has how you can get in touch with them. There's also some additional ones here as well too. Usually Google shows the listing with the higher ratings. Sometimes if you have a higher bid, so if you pay more for like a call or something of that nature, you can show up a little higher. But anyways, happy to talk through some of that stuff, like anybody has additional questions. But Ben, do you have a question? Or sorry, do you have anything else?
So if I ask for a business near me, Oliver, I'm no longer in Google My Business, I'm in local service ads. Is that correct?
Sort of. So think of Google My Business as like the organic version. Like you're not paying anything. Every business in the world is able to get a Google My Business as long as you can verify that you are a business and that you're set up in a certain place or like virtually. Local services ads is it's in search, but it's basically like your business can show up too, but instead of showing up for your business name like Bob's HVAC or whatever, you can show up for HVAC near me. So like, yes, you're right. It's for the keyword, but it's the ad version versus your organic result.
Okay, and where does sponsored ads fit into that? Because when I get organic results, it always starts with a bunch of sponsored ads, right?
Yes, those are Google ads. So they originally are listed as ads specifically, but it's just a new way that Google lists the ads to show that these are like placements that people pay for. The top 3 to 4 placements, depending upon what device you're looking through, are going to be those sponsored listings. And that's the benefit of it too, is like you as a business can pay to get to the top of the results versus having to do SEO if you don't have much of a presence. Like you could pay a few bucks to get up there versus like having to spend several months to work against bigger enterprises that have the top SEO or organic listing.
Right. So if I'm going for local service ads and I ask for an HVAC business near my fairly small town, I'm not going to get sponsored ads then. I'm going to get ads that are listed by order of how good their ratings were.
That and a few other factors. Yes. So that's like one thing. The other thing is you might get it anyways. Because if there's like a larger business that serves your smaller area, they can still show Google ads there. It's just anyone that targets your area for a given keyword. Like if they're targeting HVAC near me, because that's what they provide is like HVAC services, they could show up through Google ads or through local service ads. Local service ads, it's restricted by the locations you serve. So if they're not in a service area, they're not going to show up. So it's usually a more relevant ad.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, if anybody has like any additional questions on this stuff, again, like I've been doing it for quite a while. I was part of the pilot program that launched a beta for one of my clients when it first came out. So there's there's some limitations to local service ads, but happy to like go through anything like one-on-one if you have issues or any questions for like your particular business. Besides that, anything else before I continue to long-term solutions?
Yeah, I have a general question. And I don't know hardly anything about SEO or marketing online. So apologies to the group if this is a dumb question. What does best in class look like for a plumbing company, for an HVAC company? Like, what works? Like, what are you doing for your clients today in plumbing that's getting them leads and is growing their accounts? And I guess another part of the question is, how difficult is that? Like, and again, my mind is like, okay, the two chucks in a truck, right? Like what do we, like if I came to you tomorrow and I said, hey, help me spin up marketing for these guys, like where are you going to ramp it to, and how long does that take? And is it easy? Is it difficult? Like, is it that's what I'm trying to understand. It's like how difficult is it to get to best in class, and what does best in class look like? What are you doing?
To be honest, that is like quite the opposite of a dumb question. I think that's a pretty smart question to ask. It varies by scale, to be honest. Like best in class for somebody that has a few plumbers versus having like 50 plus plumbers is going to vary a lot. What I like to start with is basically like just the fundamentals. A brand new business should have some good free or low cost marketing efforts that are bringing in business. So referrals, doing some event marketing of some sort if applicable, not really applicable as much for the plumber, like at like a smaller scale, but it's good for like certain like B2B efforts and things of that nature. The point is like something where it's like low cost, it's doing well, great. The next step would be expanding to another channel. It might cost a little bit, but it's supposed to net you a decent return overall. Some things besides paid, you can also do affiliate marketing as well too. So pay per lead, and assuming you get a certain number of customers, that could be a good place to start. Long term, the efficiency tends to be a little lower versus having your own efforts, but that tends to be part of a business, whether small or large. Like usually, when I talk to some smaller plumbers where it's just like a mom and pop shop versus like a few folks, they tend to buy leads, say from like a Service Titan, or I have some of my affiliates, for example. I avoid it to a certain extent because it's good to like lean on for shoulder seasons or things of that nature. The issue can be like, say with like Angie's List leads or things of that nature, that you're competing with a bunch of people. They don't know your brand. They just want the service. So you're competing on cost and a wide variety of other things you don't know about. So that leads probably lower quality versus somebody that knows they're signing up for you specifically. That being said, it's still revenue. It's still a new client. It's still somebody that can help you build your book of business. So I recommend a mix of affiliate, like a little bit of that for certain moments where like you need it, because that could be good for your industry for plumbing, and just like establishing things for a channel like Google, Facebook. If you have a great email list, like email or SMS, something that you can start off with to be competent. So like early on, what best in class, in my opinion, would be is that you take a channel and you go from like nothing to you're consistently generating results every single month. Like you went from like not doing anything at all on this channel to like you're getting clients every single month, or basically every month you have service besides the off season perhaps. That's where I'd start. The in between for that, for like a medium in the SMB side of things, tends to be you have a channel or two you're doing well on, and then you want to expand out to more channels. You want to dominate the market. So for example, for Google, say if there are 100 people searching for HVAC services in a month and you're showing up 20% of the time, you should try to show up 60% of the time or 80% and try to make sure you can service all of them. The next step would also be going to other channels too, to say like, okay, like talking about here with like testing new marketing channels, like best in class, in my opinion, is be able to take what you have at your smaller scale. So say if you have like 2 to 5 technicians, and go to gradually scale from like 2 to 5 to like 10 to 20. Because that requires usually multiple channels. Leaning on affiliate can be great for this, because like sometimes there can be some ebbs and flows in testing new channels. But the best in class would essentially be that you've gone from this one channel plus referrals or something of that nature to now being on multiple channels for like paid media, or say like paid media plus organic, like SEO, paid or organic social. That tends to be what I think is best for marketing overall there. And it's it gets harder as you scale up more. Like early on, wins to go, say for example, from 10 to 20 leads a month, that's a lot easier versus going from 10,000 leads to 20,000 leads. It takes a lot more at scale. Economies of scale are a little trickier. Eventually, what you want to do in best in class tends to be the larger folks have all their channels covered, like everything's covered, every single channel. They might even be doing a little bit of TV, radio to raise brand awareness. So they're not necessarily ready to buy. They're not even looking for solutions. They may not even have a house, but just to know, like, for example, you've probably seen the ads for Plumline on like the billboards. There are probably some of them, given somebody's from Plumline, please don't quote me on this, yada, yada, but there's some of the worst ads for getting direct results. There's no phone number on them. There's no direct contact. It's just, they have Plumline. They do plumbing, HVAC, and a few other things. Like the reason they do that probably is to raise awareness, and they have that kind of money to expand out. They have a robust customer service team to make sure they follow up very quickly and 24/7. They have a full team that's prepared to follow up with folks, and they're looking at things very frequently to make sure they're reaching their multiple millions of dollars made each month. But there's usually a mix between an in-house team, like you also have a few people in-house with a vendor, so somebody that like specializes in certain things. I see this especially say with lawyers, certain HVAC groups, like, it's hard to have competencies in every single channel as you do that, but you do need to be on a variety, and best in class tends to be that. You have folks that can manage the whole picture in-house, but then you have your specialists either somewhat in-house, but also like you have people you can lean on for certain things, because it doesn't make sense, for example, to have a full-time billboard person necessarily in-house, but to go to an agency to do it, absolutely. Same thing for, say, like Google or Meta or things like that, where like there's evolving bodies of knowledge. They can help you get more efficiency. They focus on it full time versus like you having to pay somebody to do it. But that's the gist. From like nothing to something, I would focus on those first two things, because that's most people here. Usually for something like that, you're probably putting down, like, if you have a spare $1 million to $5 million to just put down on a business, like, wonderful, very happy for you, kind of jealous. But yeah, that's what that would look like in my opinion. I would focus on one channel, do some Karate Kid stuff, like wax on, wax off, try to be as competent as you can at like one specific thing, get some more market fit outside the referrals, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. What do you see in terms of like success rates and how easy or difficult it is to go from like small with nothing to like that next level where you're really mastering one channel?
Ooh. Usually it's pretty high for like smaller scale. It gets less and less as people scale up. It's not to say it doesn't happen. It's just there's less and less success cases for things like that. The other thing for the average entrepreneur outside of marketing is some folks, like, once they hit their number, like, say if you're able to make like 100 to 500K a year, and you're just happy with that. A lot of people just stop because they say, I'm just happy with that, and that's that. So like some of the success rates are lower naturally because they just don't want to do it because they're very comfortable, and they're not trying to make some sort of like multi-billion-dollar business venture, expand to multiple cities or something like that. They just want to make their money, live a comfortable life, make sure the team's taken care of, and just provide great service. And that's just what they like to do. But that's why usually nothing to something a little bit higher, especially if it's thought out, you have a budget, and like you're able to go at it. I can't give like literal numbers because I don't know the full market and like what people succeed or fail at for those things. Like I don't know how those like tens of thousands of businesses do necessarily. But when I've seen people succeed versus not, they're more likely at a smaller scale because they have some diligence, they have some sort of market fit, they have a good offer, they bring it to market, and somebody like myself or like an agency is able to accelerate that growth or get some more learnings early on so they can bring that offer to market. As long as it's something good, you should get business. It's a little easier for something like HVAC versus, say, a high-end industrial packaging service. That's going to take a lot more time. But yeah, that's the gist, in my opinion.
Okay, last question, and then I'll shut up. What do you see in terms of like taking market share, like with a plumbing company or an HVAC company? Because I feel like growth in a lot of these spaces means taking market share rather than like entering a new market where there are no players, because everywhere in the country has HVAC and everywhere in the country has plumbing. What are your thoughts on that?
It's an excellent point. I mean, unless you're making a blue ocean, which like most of this stuff isn't, like unless you have some unique tool like I'm trying to get my HVAC cert right now, and like one of the things I learned about is the multimeter, which is fascinating and fantastic, because you used to have like several meters as an HVAC technician, and they combined them all into one. So if you have something like that, wonderful. For competition, I would go back to the offer. This is why I focus on this stuff a little bit more. Like creating a killer offer. Compare this to your competition. Usually a startup, you can be more swift with like speedier service, like they are your world sort of thing. You can probably be a little bit more competitive on margin, since you don't have like massive revenue goals to hit or massive like margin goals, or like you're not a publicly traded company that needs to like report to people or something like that. My point is like, it's figuring out what you're good at versus the market. Like, you're not in a market like milk, where it's like literally like every dairy farmer offers the milk. Even then there's ways to differentiate. You probably see it in a store. Like there's several different types of milk. Some people buy the high-end milk, like for example, like in a glass jar from like a local farmer or something of that nature. Like I just labeled off some benefits to why that person or that local farmer still exists versus the multi-million-dollar milk industry with the cheaper price that's half the cost. Like it's cheaper, it fits into the budget, it's milk. But perhaps there's something about it that's a little better locally versus like from the national producer. For yourself, I think the same thing. Like for HVAC, like it's good to go through the exercise. It's also great to ask your prior customers to say like why you did business with me. Not in those words like in a sense of desperation, but in a sense of just getting to understand and like discovering new things, to say like, what'd you like about it? What didn't you like about it? When you saw it, why'd you go with us versus somebody else? But normally it's speed of service, effectiveness of service, and something where like it's cost effective relative to like the value you provide. And my personal tidbit is integrity, being able to do things where like you can trust the people you're working with. But it's going to be different for each business. But the smaller ones, like you have advantages like that. They don't scale as much. So this offer, when you start off, might be a little different later on. Like you might be able to get more cost efficiencies at a higher scale or something like that. But anyways, there's a lot to it, which is why I'm giving a lot of information, but I'm hoping that's helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful. Thanks.
Of course. Anybody else? Or I'm able to go over a few minutes too, by the way, like another few more slides. But any other tidbits like that? Again, great questions, Ben. No questions. Sure. Okay. Hold on, let me just read this through. For future sessions, we'll be any discussions on Acquira assessing the performance of our acquired company and if it's tracked appropriately, such as an existing benchmark. I'm happy to help with that. I've been working with Hayden on a couple of projects related to this. One is if you have specifics related to that, that's something that hasn't been offered through Acquira as much, but happy to go through some due diligence with you if you have any questions related to that, or if there's something that's needed. I can also provide you with a little bit of a checklist once you get to that point to say like, these are some things you should look for. But yeah, basically like, it's like some of the folks you've talked with on these other calls as well too. Like Acquira is the one providing the course and the service. I'm happy to give some additional help and due diligence for things of that nature, just because that's what I do on a regular basis. Let's see. Anything else besides that? Yeah, of course. Smile. All right. Let's see. Long term, I think this is a continued iterative thing. This kind of gets into what we were talking about with like Ben's questions. It's good to adjust these things over time, especially as you achieve a given goal. Usually to get to a next goal to scale another 10%, you're going to need a little bit more, whether it's additional channel or scaling on the current channel. I like to emphasize this as much as possible. Usually with scale, it's not just like you're making a hockey stick where you're just going up like this. It's kind of like just plateaus, and then scales like you scale up, you reach a certain point, it's kind of level for a little bit while you're trying to figure things out, improve efficiency, and then scale up again, like especially just because you need additional resources and things of that nature. Besides that, I like to set a low expectation, overachieve. So with the SMART goals, if you have a certain goal, I would recommend pulling back on that a little bit. Like try to set a low bar, especially early on for yourself and for your team, to create some like good initial wins. See where like you are able to overachieve, see where you need a little bit more help, and then grow from there. But yeah, besides that, that's pretty much what I've got for the additional scale too. There's some things that are simple as like, say on Google or Facebook, spending more to get more once you're hitting your number for an ROI. There's others like producing more content, like hiring additional content writer or using AI more to produce some additional content for, say, your blog or for organic posts, or like getting some additional influencers to like increase your reach and presence. But that's what I've got. I assume there aren't any, but just in case, any lingering questions before we all hop off? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. If there is anything else, let me know. Andy, appreciate the opportunity per the usual to present. And yeah, if like there's anything you want to dive into further, whether it's LSA or like starting off with a business and scaling, happy to do it. But yeah, otherwise, just hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a good one. Take care.
Thanks,
Oliver. I'll
Thanks so
share
much,
Oliver's
Oliver.
contact information as well, if anyone would like to reach out. So thanks.
Thanks again, Oliver.